My name is Don Dickerman with my friend Lori Bradway. Lori is from Charleston, South Carolina,
Hi, Mom.
and she came to our office for deliverance and for a week of training, and we'll be taking this back to Charleston wherever she goes. And we always have common questions about deliverance. I was telling my friend Tommy and Latrice Thomas earlier. I found out in Nicaragua, they don't use the word deliverance. They use the word release.
Excellent
And
word.
I think that's very good.
Yeah. Very apropos.
Yeah, well, and that's what Jesus said, turn her loose and let her go. That's release.
Yeah.
Any questions that are common to you that come to your mind?
Yes. About oaths and secret society vows,
Oh,
things
wow.
like that. Yeah, that's kind of a heavy-duty subject, isn't it?
Well, it is. My pastor pastored a large church, and I'm talking about very large, mega church. And I asked him one day, because we'd played golf together, I said, why don't you talk more about demons?
Every
And-
church needs to.
Yeah, and secret societies. He said, let's go have lunch. So we sat down, and he said, how many people in our congregation do you think might be Freemasons or part of some secret society? I
bit.
said, probably half. I don't know. He said, well, of those that are not, how many do you think have friends that are, or relatives that are? I said, well, that'd probably be everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He said, how many of our deacons do you think may be members of a secret society? I said, I don't know. He said, if I talk about it, I won't have a job. I won't have income from my family. I'll be called one of those guys that talks about spiritual stuff and demons. But he got pretty close to it. And so they did ask him to leave. I've heard this from hundreds of pastors. Do you know how many people in our church will be offended if I talk about this?
How many people will be set free?
Yeah, I know. But so I understand pastors they're not going to
Such a
talk
shame.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
They should, and some of them invite me to come talk about it. But you know what Jesus said about oaths and vows? And I'm going to read in Matthew 5:34. He said, I tell you to not swear at all by heaven, for it is God's throne. He said, don't swear by anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the secret society, is an oath or a vow. And in James chapter 5, verse 12, it says, above all, my brethren, do not swear, not by heaven or earth or by any other oath. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no, that you will not fall under judgment. And I want to tell you that is probably one of the most common things that we see in people's life is sins of the ancestry where they made oaths and vows, unholy, ungodly oaths and vows. I'll cut out my tongue, I'll slit my throat, ungodly stuff. And they're not necessarily bad people, but they've made a bad judgment.
You know, so much of it, I know that my dad is a Mason. His 33rd degree Mason, Shriner, and my grandfather, and on my grandmother's side, her dad was a good fellow. And so it runs deeply in my family. So that's a lot of generational curses and secret oaths and vows.
Well, it is, and you had demons in your life
A
because
lot.
of it.
Yes, and it's nothing that I did.
You had no.
But yet it was passed on.
Yes.
And they didn't, intentionally do this. And it's such
Oh,
a very subtle
Yes.
a very subtle way. And it looks like it's such a good cause with Shriners. Here they are helping crippled children. And so you think, from outside appearance that it looks like, I said, like it's a very good cause, but it's so deceptive.
Well, I heard you say something about the Shriner's hat, or
The fez.
yeah. What, you did some research on that?
Did some research on that, and it's actually a town. I forget what country it's in, but it's a town actually called Fez, and that Christians were actually martyred there, and the streets were filled with blood, and the hats that they wore were covered in the blood, and therefore they turned red, and so that's where the
Wow.
Fez comes from.
Yeah.
That's just one of the things that I learned. And, trying to approach my father with this information, he's like, I don't even want to know. I don't want to know.
No, well, they don't want to know. And what happens, these are not bad people.
No.
They when they go in on a ground level, they don't really know what they're getting into. But when they get to certain levels, they've made certain oaths and vows and secret. They won't even tell their wife. I heard one woman said to her husband in my presence, said, if that's such a good secret, why won't you tell me? Why won't you tell your wife? It's an oath. It's an ungodly oath. But yeah, we see that. I don't know that there's any life that somebody in their family, in their ancestry, did not take oaths and vows to secret organizations. People talk today about the KKK, and that's just one, It's just one of many. And there's offshoots, there's lodges, there's branches where you're required to take an oath to be a part of it. And Jesus very clearly said, swear by no man, nor heaven. Let your yes be yes, your no be no, and don't make any oaths. But that's a very common thing now. And we see people freed from that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
One of the most common illnesses we see from some of those oaths, one of them is a spirit of the chest where the candidate's blindfolded. I won't go into all of that, but one of the most common things we see is that person that takes that oath in their ancestry or in their children and children's children. We see asthma, lung problems, chest problems, and then another of the oaths is the spirit of the forehead or a gun or whatever they choose. But we see brain problems, vision problems, and people want to scoff at that. But I've been seeing it for 25 years. And while it's not anything you could write in a science book, I guarantee you it's real. And it's real dangerous. Well, you had another question. I don't know if you wrote it down, but what's the most common legal permission that we see? That's easy. It's ancestral curse and it's unforgiveness. If a person has unforgiveness in their life, they got demons. It's just an absolute permission. And I'm going to tell just a brief story, but this happened. I was preaching at a church in Houston, and there were, I don't know, typical size congregation, but on the very back row, there was a mother, and I'm guessing either her son or daughter. It was a man and woman, set of. It was either her daughter-in-law or a daughter, but she came at the altar call, and I had preached about unforgiveness. She came. She was a huge woman, just kind of waddled down the aisle, and when she got to the front, she was so big she had to sit down on the front row. I sat beside her, and she said, I can't forgive. And I said, yeah, you can. I said, who is it you can't forgive? She said, my mother. I can't forgive her. I won't forgive her. I said, you can forgive your mom. She said, I won't do it. I said, well, I can't help you if you won't forgive. I said, can you make a choice to forgive? I said, can you pray this prayer after me? Now, her family was standing behind that row, I guess praying for her, but they were there too. And I said, can you just pray these words after me? I choose to forgive my mother. Can you say those words? She eventually got them out, but she struggled. I choose. When she said that, her entire family fell to the ground behind them, just dropped. Well, what happened? Chains were broken.
Mm-hmm. Broke that curse.
The ancestry, her children, were freed from her forgiveness. So that's probably, that and generational curse are the most common things that we see.
I know too that unforgiveness is one of the biggest hindrances to healing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
and it's one of the hardest things to do too. And I know that God sees your heart. And sometimes if you've gone through a huge trauma in your life, and sometimes it's hard to let it all go
Sure.
the first time, but God sees your heart. And if you can just, maybe you can't let it all go the first time, but if you can truly in your heart just say, I forgive, and just mean it. Maybe it doesn't all that unforgiveness doesn't all go away the first time, but just continually, yes, I forgive, yes, I forgive. And let God see your heart that you genuinely mean it, then things will change.
You know what? When you can pray for that person, then you know you've forgiven them. When you can pray for God to bless them like He blesses you,
It gets easier.
that's not hard to do.
It gets easier and easier and easier.
But that's one of the most common is unforgiveness, and also oaths and secret societies.